Well, hello, beautiful souls, and greetings from the Center for Contemporary Mysticism in Philadelphia. My name is Joe Irwin, and it's a joy to gather with you again to explore this amazing journey that we share. We have a great program for you today, but first, I do like to take a moment and officially welcome everyone to our program and to the Center, particularly if you're new to the Center. We encourage you to visit our website, which is simply contemporarymysticism.org. And you'll find dozens, if not hundreds, of past videos there of speakers and programs we've had. You'll also find groups in which you can participate, spiritual sharing groups, meditating groups, either weekly, monthly. Most of them are online and available, and lots of other resources. So check that out. And remember, our goal at the Center is to be a partner with you in your spiritual journey. So if you feel what we're doing is important, we invite you to join us, get involved, support the Center in whatever way you feel called, and help us continue this work together. So we're so glad you're here with us, and now it's a pleasure to welcome back to the Center our guest for today, John Mundy. I say welcome back because he's been with us in person at least a couple of times here in Philadelphia doing workshops and program presentations, and it's a joy to have you back, John. John is one of the world's foremost researchers on mysticism, a spiritual teacher and a lecturer in philosophy and religion for over 40 years, and was a student and personal friend of Helen Schucman, who's the scribe of A Course in Miracles. John is author of 10 books, including the classic Living A Course in Miracles, and publisher of Miracles Magazine, and currently is the director of the Miracle Studies program at the All Faith Seminary in New York City. So, John, it's a pleasure to welcome you back, and it's an honor. And we want to also welcome Patricia back. She's our very own and is often here with us. She's our interviewer extraordinaire, author, former pastor, spiritual teacher, and host of the We Awakening podcast. She also has a number of companion groups working with groups of people who want to participate in the global awakening that's taking place in our world today. So remember, after Patricia and John dialogue for a while, we're going to open everything up for some Q&A, and you'll have a chance to come on and speak one-to-one with John and ask him your question or share your thoughts. So as we go through our time together, make a note. If you have a question or something in your mind you would like to ask John about, or Patricia, as that matter may be. Either way, make a note, and when we get to the Q&A session, you can click on Raise Your Hand, and we'll bring you on as many people as we have time for. So now I'm going to disappear for a while. So Patricia and John, I'll let you take it away, and then when we're ready for some Q&A, I'll appear again, and we'll have a Q&A time. So great to have you. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Joe. Very nice.
Thanks, Jill. Well, John, it's great to see you again, and I've been looking forward to engaging in a conversation with you around mysticism and why it matters.
Right.
And before we get into that, I'm curious, I'd like to have you share with our listeners what in your life experience really drew you to this exploration. What were some of your earlier experiences that really opened you up to the mystical?
Sure. First of all, let me say that I think everybody's a mystic. It may not be obvious. It may not be something that's on the outside. Anyhow, I was saying that I think everybody's a mystic. And what I mean by that is that there's really none of us that don't think about what are we doing here and how do we get into these bodies and what happens after these bodies die and how am I supposed to live here and is there a God and how to relate to that God and what kind of experiences can I have that are fulfilling and meaningful, and is there a spirit, and am I spirit? And so all those questions are there. And I think even from the youngest ages that I told my folks when I was 9 that I was going to be a minister. I mean, so that was pretty clear already. I mean, I can actually remember standing on a cistern behind our grip on a farm in Missouri, and standing on the top of this cistern. I was probably about 9 or maybe even younger, and kind of just looking. I think it was springtime. It was about now, in May, and everything was coming into bloom, and it was all kind of a great mystery. And by the way, those two words have the same root as those others. But you just want to know. You want to know what's going on. And it was always sort of pretty clear that it wasn't just about making money and having a family and doing all those kind of regular sort of things that we all do. And my mother was very strong in encouraging this, by the way. I mean, the ministerial aspect. She gave me the Bible that's right over there, and there's a picture of Jesus there that she gave me, and gave me a crank organ and to play with, and a church organ. It looked like a church organ. There was one experience in particular when I was 14. I was hunting in the woods, which is a lot of Missouri boys. I mean, that's what you did. When you had some free time, you take a gun, you go off and you hunt. And I'm 14 at this point because I got a gun when I was 14. At 12, you got a BB gun. At 14, you got a real gun over and under with anyhow. I'm standing in the woods, and there's a thing you do when you hunt that we call freezing. And you just stand perfectly still. And if the animals don't hear you tromping through the woods, if they're not downwind from you, they might not smell you. Some animals can't see too good. I mean, they'll get real close. Oh, God, human being, you know. They'll just kind of, but others, like deer or something, they'll be looking around for you. But squirrels and stuff, they don't see you till you get right on top of them. And so I'm freezing, and I do not have any idea how or why this happened, but for some reason I stopped thinking. Now, stopping thinking is a really important. Actually, Eckhart Tolle was once asked, I saw this on YouTube, what he thought his most important, significant contribution and experience had been, and he said, stopping thinking. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we just don't really stop thinking. There's always something like going on, some cogitation of some sort of, or it seems that way. But for some reason, in this particular incident, it was though I kind of went into blank space or something like that, kind of spaced out. We talk about people spacing out. Well, it was kind of like that. But then I became aware of the fact that that's what was going on. And I was just seeing. And I had the thought, what's having this experience? And then I heard an inner voice, which is a typical part of inner mystical experiences. And that just said one very simple little question. And the question was, who wants to know? I said, just who wants to know? 4 words, that was it. But it was so clear that I really knew that I was going to be spending the rest of my life trying to answer that question. And that's true. We're still working on that question.
And there's so many layers to that experience. There's the one just pure awareness of the moment.
Yeah.
When time stops, you stopped, thinking stopped, time stopped. And then there's the awareness of the awareness, like the thought comes in, right? Yeah, and so there's the awareness of the awareness. And then the question is, who's being aware of the awareness?
Yes.
And so it's like all of these layers.
That's right. Right.
And you talk in your book, Missouri Mystic, about, and this is one of the common, I guess, versions or varieties of mysticism, which is nature mysticism.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of us can relate to that. And that's probably what you were experiencing in that moment, right? Because chances are you would not have had that experience if you'd been in your kitchen. Maybe you would have. But was there something about being in nature that
absolutely. Rudolf Steiner, the great mystic, at one point said, you are very fortunate if you grow up in the midst of nature. And I was very fortunate. I mean, the woods were just 200 yards behind our barn, and I was in the woods. And it was, there's always noise in the woods, but it was quiet. I mean, the only noise is crickets and stuff like that. And so, sure. And I would practically run there after school sometimes, or ride my horse there or something. Yeah, there are other things like that. It's interesting. Ken Wapnick, who the great commentator on the Course in Miracles, grew up in Brooklyn and East New York, and then that's like not too much nature around there, So his original mystical experiences, he once described to me as being listening to music, particularly classical music, laying on the floor in his home, in an apartment. His parents were not there, just laying on the floor in the living room, listening to classical music. Well, that will do it too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so you got music, you got nature, there's other things as well, but these are facilitators and stimulants to that kind of an experience.
Yeah. So that, and it's interesting that you are able to identify a precise moment in your life where you recognize that this quest or this exploration would be the focus of what your life would be about.
Right.
Answer that question of who wants to know.
Right.
And that took you into ministry, which sort of like if you're dealing with those kinds of questions some decades ago, that would have been the normal path to take right into the church.
That's right.
So did you feel like that was a place where you could continue that exploration?
Well, keep in mind, for a farm boy in Missouri in the 1950s, there weren't a lot of choices.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, my mother was very involved in the church, and so I got very involved in it. It just seemed like a natural kind of path. And
Yeah.
actually, I wound up at the age of 18, as you know, for me reading Missouri Mystic, of actually becoming a minister of a church, rural Missouri church.
Yeah. 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 And I know for a lot of people too, things can happen in a worship experience where they open up like that and have that sort of mystical awareness.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're best known for all of your teaching of A Course in Miracles. And there's this other dimension to your experience and your background, which Joe mentioned, which is you've done this in-depth investigation into mysticism and mystics throughout the centuries and different traditions.
Right.
And what can you share with us about what you have learned about the like, first of all, what is mysticism?
Yeah.
And what are the common traits, the universal traits of the mystical experience?
Okay. First of all, what is mysticism? Mysticism is an experience. So it's an experience of love. It's an experience of the beyond. It's an experience of the infinite. It's an experience which transcends the ordinary everydayness of life. It's often something that sort of stops you. It's often something you kind of go, wow, or what is this? Or I feel this kind of connectivity to nature, connectivity to music, connectivity to this other person. By the way, one of my other first mystical experiences happened at the age of 16, and that was falling in love for the first time. Oh my God. I mean, you know, it's like head over the heels, totally, you know, just couldn't want to do nothing but give to her. And it wasn't like the love for my parents. I mean, I love my parents and I love the animals and I love the farm, my sister and extended family, but this was different. You know? This was a total commitment of the heart to another soul. And so that's very central to mystical experiences too, you know. Mm. So the further parts of your question were, what are the characteristics of a mystical experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all those are true. It's something that takes you beyond yourself, and you know it. I think one of the basic qualities of a mystical experience is called a noetic quality. The noetic means that you know. I mean, it's like there's no question about this experience. I mean, it's, quote, non-ordinary, but it's extraordinarily non-ordinary, you know, and that's why it takes you beyond yourself into this other kind of non-ordinary dimension of consciousness. There are lots of, the noetic quality is this knowing. It's like, but another quality is this ineffability, which really means that you may have a hard time describing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a primary reason for that is that it doesn't fit into words too well.
Yeah, you know, I'm just going to, before you go further on that, I was interested when I was looking at your book, What is Mysticism? To learn that root word for both mystery and mysticism has to do with one who doesn't speak, or something along those lines.
Right, right.
And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Because it does, I think, address the difficulty of speaking about
Right.
or to that kind of experience.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, you can try, and obviously the mystics over the ages have made attempts that way. Actually, the best is poetry.
Yeah.
And you get Hafiz or Rumi or some of those guys. I mean, they can express it, and you read their poetry, and then you go, yeah.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, yeah, I see it. Yeah, I hear it. You know, and yet it may just be a 5-word sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But it points to it. That's the whole. It points to the experience, and the fact that it's a guide, a director, and we get excited about that. You mentioned that I'm very deep into the Course in Miracles. Well, there's a lot of things that precede the Course in Miracles that are very similar to the Course in Miracles, and Rumi's one of them. You know, here we've got this 13th century Persian mystic who is saying the same thing that A Course in Miracles is saying. Different words, but it's the same thing. You know?
Yeah.
And the Zen, too. Zen is very close to the Course in Miracles. You know, I mean, there are just sentences in the Course in Miracles that is the only infinite patience produces immediate effect. Wow. Only infinite patience. If you can be infinitely patient in any one moment, that ego chattering mind, that has to stop for something like that.
Which is, to me, also that suspension of time that you shared with that about your experience
Right.
when you were 14. So traits of mysticism or the mystical experience, a noetic quality, it's a direct knowing. You just know. You just know.
Right.
The ineffable nature of it, it's difficult to like convey. It's sort of slippery when it comes to language.
Right.
What are some of the other traits?
Well, probably a major factor is the loss of the ego. Now, when I say loss of the ego, I mean loss of the me, I, self, John Mundy, space, time, career, occupation, name, even the name.
Yeah.
The name is a label,
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that kind of goes, and it has to go, because that's not who we are. I mean, there will not be a John Mundy in heaven. I've said that many times, and that kind of upsets and offends some people sometimes. But just meaning that, again, that's a label that's put onto a body. And one of the things that the Course is very, very clear about is you're not a body. You're a spirit, and spirit doesn't have that kind of definition to it, right?
Yeah. So in the mystical moment, that all drops away.
That all drops away.
Identification with that temporal self.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've heard it said that when you get mystics together, no matter what their backgrounds or cultures or whatever, when you get mystics together, they all agree.
Yeah.
And then when the theologians come in, that's when the fights begin.
Yeah, you're quite right, because then you've got dialogue, and then you've got differences of opinions and ideas and belief systems,
Right. So it then gets converted into concepts,
right.
And there's disagreement about the concepts.
That's right.
But this mystical experience is going to the raw data, I guess I would say.
That's a good way.
The raw data of who we are and what reality is before we try to make sense of it in any kind of way, or, fashion any kind of structure around it.
I kind of enjoy being with other mystics, because you know, I mean, you kind of just know, and you don't even have to talk, know, just to be in the presence and to feel a commonality, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So you said at the beginning that we're all mystics.
Right.
And I think there can sort of be this tendency of thinking that mysticism is something special, or people who have mystical experiences are special. Would you speak to that? I mean, what's that about?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, the state that we're in, what we call normal, is the ego state. And that state is ridden with problems and the world and money and arguments and differences of opinion and concerns about the body and having to take care of all this physical stuff that's going on within the context of the world and trying to make it as a success and build a name for myself or whatever that stuff is that one is doing, all of which is actually pulls us away from the mystical awareness, because as the world grows in importance to it, from the Bible, what benefits a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And yet so much of ordinary life is just about nicer car, bigger home, a yacht, I don't know what else, but that somehow or another, and the Course in Miracles is the answer is not there. It's not in the material. It can never be in the material because it is an experience, and I can have that just as well in my bedroom as I could on a beach in the Caribbean, both of which are quite accessible to a mystical experience, but I don't have to be on a beach in the Caribbean to living on my private island.
Right. So it is accessible. It's in our nature to experience this.
Yeah, and we thirst for it, I think, actually.
Yeah, I think we really do.
Oh, yeah, we want it.
Yeah, and as you well know, there have been studies that even as church participation has declined, people's reports of having mystical experiences is very much on the rise.
Right.
And so there is this hunger, I think, for this. This is the real deal, right? This direct, immediate experience.
Right. There's a difficult, as you know, you were a pastor yourself for quite a long time, and I read your book as well. So, as you know, all the structure and the strictures and the rules and the regulations and the creeds and the dogmas, that all starts taking us away from the experience.
Right.
Especially if you think it has to happen within this particular context, and you have to believe these certain kind of principles are true, and some of them are really not easy to buy, and some of them, okay, I don't have any trouble with saying Jesus is my savior, but boy, oh boy, don't ask me to promise that I'll never have sex outside of marriage.
Right. Yeah, so there's nobody owns this experience. No institution owns.
Yes, exactly.
And as we've noted before, people can have the experience within the institution, but it's not controlled or owned by.
No.
So as you look, John, at our world right now and all the crises that we're facing, why do you think mysticism matters right now? Why is it important?
Well, I think that there is a raise in consciousness that's going on. I'm sure of it. It's been going on for a very long time, and it's actually becoming more dynamic. And that has to do with the whole evolutionary process of exponential growth. As we grow, as the mind grows exponentially, everything grows exponentially, right? Money can grow exponentially, you can do it right. Technology is the most incredible example of it. I mean, my goodness, what we've been able to do in the past 20 years is just, and that's not slowing down. That's going to keep speeding up, and the more it does, it's going to introduce us to other dimensions. But the same thing is happening on the level of mind. So the mind keeps it, which means that the old has got to go. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not cruel. It's not a put down. It's just we've outgrown it. We've outgrown the institution of the church, for one thing. I think there's a lot of nice things about church now, and I know that you do too. I remember talking to you at one point. I said to you, one of the things that I miss the most is singing.
And I said, "Oh yeah, totally."
Oh yeah, singing. I mean, but that's a part of the mystical dimension is with other people.
Exactly. Exactly, which is the transcendence of the separate self, the individual self, to be participating in this collectively, moment collectively.
Right.
Yeah, and music itself, as you mentioned with Ken Wapnick's experience, that can open people up as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when you have to recite the Nicene Creed,
Right.
You have to say some of these things that sound kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. So it's a mixed
You know,
bag.
it's like, oh, do I want to say that?
Right. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of fingers crossed in church, I think, when people.
Oh, yes, right.
So, as we're talking here about the mystical experience being a moment when the egoic self falls away, the egoic mind falls away, just goes silent. And as I look at the world right now, it's like we're having this volcanic eruption in some ways of ego, of egoic patterns. Which to me means, for me personally, I feel that it's that much more important for me to be opening to that mystical dimension.
Right.
Because also, as you know, in that mystical moment, fear also falls away.
Right. Very important.
We know that we are in love and that everything is love. So there's this way in which, and I think especially with all the fear that's present on the planet right now, when we can open up to this other dimension of our being, it puts it all in a different perspective.
Right.
Now, I was really interested in looking at your book, What is Mysticism? And I can't remember. I mean, this is such an encyclopedia of mystics. It's remarkable. And so I don't remember which person delineated or did the survey or whatever of all of the experiences that opened people up, many of which we would judge to be negative experiences.
Right.
And at the top of the list was despair and depression.
Right.
That was the number one thing that was a catalyst for people.
Right.
So share what you know or what you sense about that. Why is that such a potent?
Well, it's not just despair and depression, because the despair and depression in and of itself is not a mystical experience.
Right.
But it can lead you to a mystical experience, especially. Another way to talk about it is, especially when it's a crash and burn experience. I mean, where you hit bottom.
Yeah.
A good example would be what an alcoholic, let's say, goes through.
Right.
So despair and depression is accompanying the alcoholism, and the more they drink, the more despair, the more depression, the more they go down. But if you're lucky, you're going to hit bottom.
Yeah.
And you're going to say, I can't do this anymore. Something has got to change. There has to be another way. And then you start coming up out of the experience by literally stopping the alcohol in that particular case, or a drug or whatever. It could be other things. But something changes, and then you start coming out of it. And somebody actually wasn't with drinking, he was smoking. He told me that he eventually gave up smoking. And then a year or so later, he's standing around watching people smoking at some place. And I think, what a weird thing these people are doing. I mean, it's like, but because he transcended it, he got out of it. And those folks, they can't get out of it. They don't think they can get it. Of course, you can't get it. Anybody can get out of it. But you seem to be trapped. And the Course is very clear, by the way, that it's not the body that's doing it. It says appetites are getting mechanisms. They are not of the body. They're of the mind. So the mind is getting this experience. Or overeating is another good example of that. And people can crash and burn with that. Just as one practice, that's probably the most universal of all difficulties that people maybe have in crash and burn with. Or with the handling of money, that's be another crash and burn kind of bankruptcy. Your values were in the wrong place.
Right. And these crash and burn experiences, it seems to me, lead or really necessitate at some point a surrender.
Yes.
And that is talk to us about surrender, the importance of surrender in mystical experience.
Sure. Well, I mean, the main thing that happens in surrender is saying, help me. But who are you saying help me to? You're saying it to God, right? That old saying that there are no atheists in foxholes. I don't even believe there are many atheists, even though I read just yesterday a thing on YouTube about how atheism is growing. in different countries around the world, and it was which of the most atheistic countries, of 15 most atheistic countries in the world. And I don't believe it, but I mean, I don't believe it's a matter of atheism. I think it's a matter of people quitting traditional religion, quitting the church, that sort of thing, and not having any place else to go. I mean, not real. Maybe they go swimming or they go into nature. Maybe they go on a hike or whatever they're doing. They're finding other things to do with their lives, but that desire hasn't changed for the infinite. That'll never leave you, right? But you got to be willing to look at it as well and recognize that. How can I present? That's what the Course in Miracles, which it does so well. It's a non-institutional form. It's a path. It's a path. You just follow this mystical path, and it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you, in your own experience, you had a moment of deep, deep surrender.
Oh.
Can you share with us what that was about?
Well, yeah. Okay. First of all, I'll preface this by saying it happened under guidance of a Mexican psychiatrist whose name is Dr. Salvador Roquette, and it happened with the use of psychedelic drugs. Two different ones. One was LSD, which puts you on the beginning of the journey, and then a second, which is ketamine, which literally, I don't recommend this to anybody, okay? I want to say that right away. I don't recommend it to anybody. It produced a death experience. Mm-hmm. By that I mean, this happened in the jungles in Chiapas in southern Mexico in 1976, so it was quite a while ago that this happened. I went there. I had an experience with LSD in 1966, 10 years earlier, alone in the mountains in Southern California, actually. And that was very beautiful. That was very nice. It was just, so many things opened up, and I saw so much, with, just watching flames in a fire, and things started coming out of the flames, and the concepts were just expanding so incredibly into. I was writing my master's thesis at the time on the works of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I don't know whether you ever studied Chardin or not, but that was my guy at that particular point. And Chardin, the French Jesuit priest, theologian, who got kicked out of the Catholic Church. Actually, he didn't get kicked out, but they refused to print his books. But the minute he died, his friends started printing his books. And they got out. So partly the reason they didn't accept him because he was talking about evolution. But he was talking about evolution of consciousness and evolution of the body. So that was the 1966 experience. 76 is another matter altogether, because Salvador gave you the LSD. You're laying in a blanket, a sleeping bag, actually, in a hut in the jungles. Mm-hmm. And you're blindfolded. Nobody can touch you. You got earphones on. So whatever you're hearing is only what Salvador was putting through and he knew what to put through the earphones to help you to facilitate this experience. It's pretty, actually, there's a chaotic part of it in the beginning. It gets very soft and gentle before you come out of it. And then what happens with ketamine? Ketamine is not recommended. It's actually used on animals a lot because it can be used in the field. It doesn't require oxygen to be on you at the same time or any kind of anesthesia like that. It's an anesthetic itself. It knocks out the body. You cannot move. You couldn't move a little finger, right? So the mind is really, really gone. It's way out here. And then that knocks out the body. So you die, in essence. You can't move. So I thought I was dying. I thought I had died. I didn't know you could come back. I didn't know it was possible. So then everything disintegrated. By that I mean John Mundy, space-time, the farm, the family, all that stuff, all the external stuff. I think we all kind of go through this as we literally die, by the way. Physically, the day we die. I'm not going to say it's going to be not like this experience particularly, but there's elements of it. In fact, as I once had on my show, Sunday with Mundy, Peter Panagore, who had a profound death experience in the mountains when he was climbing and fell off a ledge, and I won't go into a description of it, but he froze to death essentially before they was able to get to him. But they resuscitated him, and he came out of it. It was profound. I love studying near-death experiences because they're so similar. It is a mystical experience, right? But the fact that everything disappeared and I had to go into this there wasn't any choice about it. There wasn't any choice. I did not believe I could come back. I didn't know you could. In fact, as I left John Mundy, I left that whole thing, that physical being laying there on a floor in a hut, and there was just the experience. And I won't begin to describe the different dimensions and levels and layers of that. And I'd roll over and turn out one way, and then something would happen, I'd roll out in this other experience. It was kind of like going through a dream, because in a dream, dreams morph. You're having, you're on a train, but no, you're in an airplane. And so it keeps morphing from one form into another form. But being shown so many things, it was a beautiful experience. Afterwards, by afterwards, coming back into the body, when I was eventually able to come back completely, I know how this is going to sound, but it sounds the way it is, mind blown. That was, all of the ordinary interpretations were gone. And the next month or so for after that were really, really beautiful. I had this immediate kind of contact with people. And I unfortunately spent the month after that in a cabin in the woods, not too far from where we live right now. And that was a beautiful facility. But I could feel the socialization coming back. You get caught in the news, you get caught in the world, the society, and whatever's going on. And it's like, all right, but you can't lose it.
Yeah, once you know it, you know it. You can't unknow it.
You can't unknow it. That's a good
But you raise an important point, I think, which is the integration of the experience in the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
Integrating it into our lives.
Right.
Which can be pretty rough sometimes because it can be such a jarring, back and forth, like whiplash or like culture shock or something like that. And it sounds like you had some spaciousness of time and being able to be in a cabin where you could let that happen.
I think you're speaking from experience, Patricia.
I think.
No doubt, right?
Well, and that's also where, in the aftermath of it, so the ego falls away.
Right.
In that moment or that experience. And then coming out of it, the ego can come back. And and who is it that talks about the spiritualized ego? But where the ego then can kind of co-opt the experience. And this, I guess, comes back to like, is mysticism special or are mystics special? Because the ego is all about being special, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it, looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. So that whole, and you've talked about this before in the course as well, that there's the purification that's necessary.
Right.
And it feels like that's part of it too.
You have to come back and be a person in the world. All right, here's the name, and here's your geography, here's your occupation, and you got to earn money. And, you do the things in the world, but at the same time, without being crazy. In fact, is not only do the things in the world, but do the things in the world with love and compassion and generosity. And so that you take care of this physical thing, you take care of your finances, you help other people. Yeah. And you do well enough that you can help others as well. Yeah. Which is very important in terms of the Course, because there's only one of us here. There's this great line in the Course in Miracles where it says, you can't hurt somebody else without hurting yourself. Whoa, that's really true. What goes around comes around. That's the most basic law in the universe. Yeah. That's karma. Yeah. But you want to help. You want to share. You want to give. And that's the love that's coming out. And that's what's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, well, we're fortunate. We're here with the Center for Contemporary Mysticism. And so that experience is accepted. We understand that as part of the human experience.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are hesitant to share about their mystical experiences for fear of being thought, crazy, in essence.
Yeah.
Mysticism can be seen as psychosis.
No doubt.
So, and I think that's an interesting, when you hear voices, what is that then? And how do you discern?
Right. And I love it. Joseph Campbell, who I took a course with Joseph Campbell back in 1973 in New York. I remember he at one point said, "What's the difference?" He was asked by Bill Moyer, asked him at one point in one of that series that he did, "What's the difference between a mystic and a madman?"
Yeah.
And he says, "The madman drowns in the ocean in which the mystic swims."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Isn't that good?
Wow.
Right. That's what happened. The madman is drowning in this experience, and they don't have balance, and they can't orient themselves in the world. And you got to be able to come back and be able to be, quote, normal within the context of the world as well, or in everyday.
While recognizing that the world is insane.
Right.
So many ways, the insanity of the world, which of course the course is,
But a really important part of that too is, and that I see with my ordinary friends, but not getting plugged into the world, not pointing out the insanity of the world, not saying how crazy it is, even though it's true. I mean, this is an insane world. There's no doubt that we got wars. In fact, as I bet the fundamentalists, evangelicals are having we got war, we got plague, we've got,
fire.
all fire, it's all there.
Yeah.
Just exactly what it says in the book of Revelations, and they're probably pointing it out. These are the end times.
Right.
But what's the end time mean? It doesn't necessarily mean destruction. For the physical, it really means we're moving to another level now of being able to see and to know and to be, because the old always falls away. It always falls off. I think it's very interesting that the Protestant Reformation began exactly 500 years ago.
Right.
Right. Exactly. In Martin Luther was excommunicated from the Catholic Church in January of 1521.
Interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's exactly 500 years ago that he got kicked out. If they'd have worked with him, he could have helped transform the church, but they kicked him out.
Mm-hmm.
And once he got kicked out, he was a very religious, mystical man, and he just had to go ahead and do what he did. But then it started popping all over the place.
Right.
Because it wasn't just in northern Germany. It was happening in Switzerland and France and England. And everybody was ready for it.
Yeah.
And now we're ready for another jump.
Yeah. And as you talk about that, sort of like this apocalyptic moment that we find ourselves in, and I was just thinking about this as I was reading that list of things that can prompt people into a mystical experience.
Right.
And we mentioned the despair and depression, and grief is up there, and loss and all of that.
Right.
And I see all of that happening right now in the world. There's despair, there's depression, there's grief, there's loss. And it's almost like everything is so primed for us to have a collective mystical moment. And I don't think it's happening like one moment, but more and more people are, I think, having this experience. And again, it's this surrender. There's this surrender, this deep, deep surrender. Yes, recognizing that we cannot control.
Right.
We don't have control.
And you don't want to have control. I mean, because this is the moment where we turn it all over. You know, and God, you lead. Let me follow you. Because we messed it up, and now we need correct. The Course talks about GPS, God's plan for salvation. There is a plan, and it's a matter of getting our minds aligned with the mind that makes that plan come to fruition. And then it works out okay, because then you find nothing is lost except something that was never eternal in the first place. Right?
And that we surrender to love. It's always
surrender.
Always surrender to love.
I like Buckminster Fuller saying, you don't change the old by resisting it. You change it by making it obsolete through superior methodology. I remember sharing that with you once before, and you liked it. It's really true. There's a superior methodology. So the Protestant Reformation was a superior methodology. Now we need another superior methodology.
Right.
And it's happening. The churches, I guess are dying very, very rapidly. Yeah. Just phenomenal how quickly.
I know. And it's, and I also know that there's a lot of sadness and grief in that. And
oh, sure.
We're really struggling with that. So
I understand.
It's, yeah. Well, John, I want to make sure that we leave time for our participants to ask their questions, since I've had the opportunity to indulge myself with mine. And this has been really, really great talking to you. And I'm going to ask Joe to come back on, who will be guiding the Q&A time. And then I'm going to disappear for a moment, and you all have fun.
Okay.
Thank you so much, John and Patricia, for that informative and enlightening conversation. I want to go ahead and open it up for some questions and invite our attendees who might have a question to click on the raise your hand button. So you need to click on that so we'll know if you do in fact have a question. And that way we'll call on you and bring you on and let you ask a question of John. So I'm noticing, and I do want to give you a reminder that our meetings are open to the public and recorded, and sometimes we use them on our educational purposes on our social media or website or YouTube. So if you prefer not to share your smile on the screen, that's okay. You can actually add a question in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. So you have some options there. But we love to see you and be able to dialogue with you. And I think I'm seeing that we have a question from Bill that we'd like to bring on. So Bill, if you will click on your video. Let's see if we can get this working here. There you go. Click on to turn on your video and unmute yourself. Where'd you go? Okay.
There he is.
Yep. Okay. Are you seeing Bill?
Seeing the name.
There you go, Bill. Thank you. Super. And unmute yourself. And come on and unmute yourself and ask your question of John.
Hi, Bill.
You're still muted,
I'm
Bill.
muted, Bill. I heard that the other day. That's one of the most common comments.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're muted. Probably lower left corner.
There you go.
There you go.
You can hear me now.
Yes.
I can indeed.
Good.
Okay. Thanks for calling on me. John, could you talk about ways to facilitate people to have a mystical experience? There's this atmosphere that, the place to be is in direct experience, rather than inheriting from external authorities. So then the next thing is, well, how can someone have that experience?
Sure.
Probably for most of us, it just happens. But suppose you're trying to help somebody else to have the experience. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, the number one thing, which the Zen Buddhists would really tell us in particular, but the Course in Miracles says peace comes to the quiet mind. We can't be projecting all of this stuff out onto all these judgments, analysis, interpretations onto the world. We've got to come down and get into a quiet place ourselves, whether that's meditation to facilitate that, or as we were talking earlier, just being in a place like being in nature alone, or whatever kind of circumstances you can put yourself in will help to facilitate that process. It may be like him listening to music again, but not music with words, just the Kyoto music or something like that. But the Course in Miracles also provides a pathway for this, and it's not an easy path. By that I mean it takes work, but the work is the work of letting go of the ego. I mean, of really surrendering to that. I mean, recognizing it doesn't work. It's just a worry wart, and you've got to begin to notice how much you're projecting. That's the main thing. And so the first step is to stop projecting. You cannot be receptive and projective at the same time. That's the best way I could say it. There's a wonderful line in the Course. Most courses, projection makes perception. The world you see is what you make it. Well, we're making up the world all the time. So you got to stop making up the world. So how do you stop making up the world? First of all, just to recognize that you can. To recognize that this incessant cognition stuff that's going on, we can bring that to a halt. That's what we were talking a moment ago about crashing and burning experiences. That's not what you want to do in order to have a mystical experience. It works, but only because you get overloaded and you get to what the Course in Miracles calls a turning point. You've got to get out. You got to turn it over. There's no other choice. So you don't want to get to that place. So there's more than one way. Zen, and as I said in the Course, are very similar. Zen requires that we sit. We sit and we get quiet. The Course in Miracles is a path of healing all of our relationships. Healing that in the process is one of forgiveness. As I let go of that external nonsense, then I begin to open myself to the possibility of this experience. It's that simple.
That's a great question. Looked like, thank you, Bill. We've got a question from Cole. So, Cole, if we can bring you on, we would like to have your question. You can click on turn on your audio or video. All right, let's see if we're getting it here. All right, that's not working at the moment. I'm going to go to Cliff. I notice we have a question from Cliff. Cliff, can you turn on your video? There we go, and unmute yourself. Very good. There's Cliff.
Hi, Cliff.
Hi, John. You had mentioned earlier that there's no John Mundy in heaven. And I think there won't be any Cliff Cutler in heaven either. But I think there's a pattern of lovability that we all have. Our bodies change over again and again and again. And I can meet someone who I knew 50 years ago, and there's something about that person, even though he or she doesn't look anything like they did before, that I can recognize. And yes. I wonder if you talk about, I don't know what you want to call it, but there is something about us that I think is recognizable. And all I can think of is to call it a pattern of lovability. But can you comment on that?
I like your phrase, pattern of lovability. That's a good one. So like when people have near-death experiences, or when they come back, one of the most common things is I hear them say that I saw my mother, or my father, or whoever. That's the people we love. The love is the connecting thing that's working at that point. It may no longer have that same physical bodily form, but you know that these are people that you love, and those are the people that you're connected with. And so that's always going to be working that way. I think we don't lose love.
Yeah, thank you.
Simply, you may lose your externals, but you don't lose the love.
That's what I like, the idea that we don't lose love. I think that's
no, you can't lose love. Yeah, no, love's eternal.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff. One of my favorite quotes in the Course in Miracles, it says, "You are altogether irreplaceable in the mind of God. No one else can fill your part And while you leave your part of it empty, your eternal place merely waits for your return. So, at the same time, there's something unique and special in each one of us. And kind of what you're saying, it's not going to always go by the same name.
No.
But as Cliff said, I thought that was a very poignant statement that there's a lovability or an essence there that is eternal, that is throughout time.
Right.
And that's something that seems over and over again is established even in A Course in Miracles. Right. I want to remind people we do have the Q&A session that if you maybe haven't wanted to come on the screen and would like to put a question, there's a Q&A button that you can click on. And if anyone else has a question and would like to come on and ask it, I still was trying to get Cole on, but evidently we're not connecting with Cole because we need to get the audio turned on. So, John, I would say, why don't you see if there's anything you might like to say to kind of wrap up what we've been talking about. And as we look to the future, you so rightly pointed out, without a doubt, there is a rise in consciousness in not only our country, our world, that is going on. And so many people are in such a different place now than they were, not only 100 years ago, but even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It seems exponential, as you mentioned, rise. And looking forward, what does that portend?
Well, I think the main thing is trust. The first characteristic of a teacher of God, excuse me, the manual for teachers is trust. And we trust God is in charge. So let's don't get too panicky and too worried about what's happening in terms of the external dimensions of the world. And in a lot of ways, the old does have to fall away in order for the new to be able to come into form and to be born. And sometimes there's a birthing process that we go through, and that's not always an easy process to go through. But the good news is you come out on the other side.
Right.
And in that sense, it all works all right. And especially if love guides the way. The Course in Miracles says the opposite of love is fear, but what's all-encompassing? Love is all-encompassing. Can't have an opposite. There's really nothing to be afraid of. Many people are afraid of dying. Well, that's natural from the bodily standpoint, but I think that we're going to find out that, as Neely Donald Walsh says, that's going to be the most beautiful day of your life. Because it's actually the point at which you become liberated from this. From the form of the thing, and that's especially true if it's sick and old and tired and hurting and just not working very, very well at all. I had an experience this past summer with COVID where I got really, really sick, but I was 24 days in isolation in the hospital with COVID. And there was a point about 2/3 of the way through that where I recognized that I could leave, and all I had to do to leave was just go to sleep. When you get tired, you want to go to sleep at night. I can imagine many millions of soldiers on battlefields that have been wounded and die. Just look for death as a blessed relief from the pain of all that war that they were in, the horror of what they were going through. So there's nothing to be afraid of that. And it doesn't matter what happens in space-time so much. If we start thinking we got to go build, castles for ourselves and store up our food and stuff like that, there's nothing wrong with that. If that makes you feel better and more secure. But let's not bet on the world. Let's bet on the eternal. Yeah.
Well, and you can imagine people going through experiencing what's going on in the Ukraine. Just week after week, month after month, everything you've known is destroyed. The people you love are injured or killed. That I would think there's so many of those who are ready of the blessed relief of making that transition.
Right.
But another way to look at it, you had mentioned, I think so appropriately, that we can't project and create the world at the same time we're open to receiving.
Yes.
In looking for more of a transcendent experience. And I think we learn to kind of break old habits of being totally dominated by our senses.
Yes.
See, and find times to either be quiet, be alone, be in nature, be contemplative, so that we can stop, at least for a period of time, the constant mental jabber of projecting the world in front of us, and be open to that, as it says in the Bible, the still small voice. If that still small voice is trying to speak to us, it's not going to do much good if we're, blabbering so much and our mind is so busy and loud that we can't hear it. And so it's a daily practice. And that's why I think they call it a journey. But this has been so wonderful, to have you share the wealth of your experience in just the years of working in the field of mysticism, and sharing this with us is a real treat. So I'm going to ask Patricia if she would come back on. And I don't know, Patricia, if you might have any other thoughts or reflections to wrap up before we close here with John.
Well, I just want to express my appreciation, John, for the depth of your understanding about all of this and bringing this different dimension. I know a lot of people are really struggling right now with everything that's happening. And I think that really grounding ourselves in this mystical knowing is the antidote. And so I just appreciate all the work that you're doing to help people, and especially through your work with the Course as one of the ways for us to navigate these times. So thank you. It's really great speaking with you, John, again.
Let me just add one thing, if I could, which is if there's a perspective that we want, which is in line with the mystical thinking and also the Course in Miracles, just remember, do not attack. I mean, just remember, let's don't get into an argument. Let's don't get into a debate. Let's don't get into a fight. Let's don't say you're wrong and I'm right. And that's just a level of insanity that will keep you distracted and will keep you from seeing all the time. And it just doesn't work. It's not the Republicans. It's not the Democrats. It's not the Jews. It's not the Muslims. It's not the Christians. All of that stuff is just look into those. And we had this horrible experience this past week here in New York of a young man killing 10 black people. That is just total insanity. I mean, to think that something, the color of your skin has something to do with who you are. I mean, it has something to do with our experience, but the soul, actually the word for disciple in Hindustani is colorless, transparent. It's transparent. The soul is transparent. It doesn't have that kind of form to it. And that's what we have to see. We have to see love is transparent. Love penetrates all things without hesitation. So that's where we want to go. I'll tell you one funny story and we'll wrap. I was giving a talk at Unity of Chicago. It's just several years ago. Huge audience. I mean, that day the place was packed. And from the pulpit, I said, does it make any difference if we're Republicans or Democrats? And some guy on the very, very back row yelled out, yes! And the entire congregation roared in laughter. And it was one of those laughs that rolled. I mean, it lasted a good minute or more. I mean, it just continually, they got it. I mean, it doesn't make any difference if you're a Republican or Democrat, And if you think that it does, well, then you got a little bit of a problem there.
Yeah, we are here in the battleground state.
Okay, that's right. You are.
And I think of the mind, as being a battle, the egoic mind as being the battleground state. So it's like, just walk off the battlefield. Just walk off the battlefield. So thank you for bringing that up. It's so key.
Oh, it is so key. And Dr. Oz is one of your guys there, right? Yeah,
we've got a very interesting election season.
I'm gonna just say something about Oz. He's the only man in my life that actually held my heart in his hand.
He was your
You
heart
mean
surgeon.
for heart surgeon?
He was my
Wow.
heart surgeon. Yeah.
Wow. Boy, that's wild.
Yeah. The only one that could do it.
Yeah.
Literally.
That's something. Well, we all remember that quote from Rumi that says, out beyond the right doing and wrongdoing, there's a field and I'll meet you there.
I'll meet you
And
there.
I think the important thing is as I see it, none of this is saying that we don't at times feel called to take action.
Oh, yeah.
But it's where the action comes from. Is it coming out of a place of love and of the ability to see that we are all one,
Exactly.
wanting the best for this oneness, or
Right.
is it coming out of anger and kind of almost revenge? Like last time, our party got beaten, so this time, we're going to beat them good. These sorts of things.
Yeah, that's
and you see, if we let our own inner peace be destroyed, we're not going to be bringing much peace into the world. But at the same time, we have the right by our life and by our actions to let it manifest who we are, whether that is in how we vote, whether that is in participating in a peaceful rally,
sure.
or whether that is in being a monastic and spending our day in prayer.
Yeah.
There are those who would say, well, if you're not out on the political battlefront, you don't care. Well, is that saying all of the monks and the people who have dedicated their life to a life of prayer are not making a difference? And I don't think that that's the case. So it's the fact of what is coming from within that then manifests itself in different ways. But it has to come from a place of peace, a place of transcendence, to where we see the whole picture as one, even though it's struggling and working hard against itself at times. And
right.
So, today in Philadelphia, there's an interfaith peace walk.
Oh, good.
And to me, that's a beautiful way of saying, we come from different backgrounds, different religions, different perspectives, but we're going to walk together for peace. So those are things I think that come out of this reawakening toward the transcendence in life, toward the mystical aspect of life, to which we're all being called. So it's really been an honor, John. And I want to thank you. I want to thank those, Patricia, and those who were part of our discussion today and came on and asked a question and involved in dialogue. If you want to know more about John, his work, his books, his podcast, his online interviews, just go to miraclesmagazine.org. That's the name of the magazine he has founded and works to publish. So it's just miraclesmagazine.org. And if you want to know more about Patricia, there's the latest copy.
The latest issue.
Know more about Patricia and her We Awakening podcast, which is really an amazing podcast she does on a regular basis, or her companion groups. You can go to Patricia Pierce, spelled P-E-A-R-C-E, patriciapierce.com. And of course, don't forget to go to our center website, where there are many programs and resources available to you. So normally I would mention our next upcoming program, but we take a bit of a break in the summer. But our program committee is right now working on some great programs coming up in the fall and the months ahead. We're going to have some phenomenal speakers such as Matthew Fox, Evan Alexander. Penny Gill is going to come back with us, Peter Panagore, Jeffrey Olson. We're working on maybe doing a day-long contemplative retreat that we might share with you to work through the day for a contemplative retreat online. So lots of exciting things. So be sure and keep an eye on our website. Make sure you're on the mailing list to be notified of those. So now, until we meet again, I'm going to say stay safe, be well, and remember, you are perfect just exactly as you are. Namaste.
Thank you, Joe. That's great.
Blessings.
Patricia, thank you too.
Thank you, John. Be well.
Be well all.
You too. You too.